Hey guys, this is Dylan. This is my Jeep 97 Wrangler 4.0 5-speed on JT axles. So a lot of my information today is literally just going to be about the axle swap. Um, Overall, I bought both axles for $4,000 off Facebook Marketplace. They were like under a Jeep, barely used. Now some costs that I went through to actually make all of this stuff work. When I bought these, they did not come with brake calipers for the front and rear, so I had to buy those from Mopar Parts Online. Those were probably about $500-600 from what I remember. I'd have to actually go find the receipts, but they're probably about that much. And something weird for the rear calipers. We can take a look here. These rear calipers, the JL and the JT calipers are actually different. I originally thought I had a JL axle, not a JT. So on the JL calipers for the rear, these two mounting points are actually further apart, and then the spacing for the pads here is narrower. So I ended up having to replace these with actual JT calipers. It's such a small difference, I'm not sure why they did it, but that is definitely something to look out for. Now for these axles, a big thing, at least for the front, that I was happy about is Barnes 4-wheel drive. They make a bracket kit for the front axle that is the spring perch, the shock mount. It changes it from the bar pin to just a straight through like a normal shock. So I'm actually running JK Fox front end shocks that are meant for like a 2.5-3 inch lift. These are working out great. And they also come with the sway bar link here. So that kit I think was around like $160-200. Another thing I added, I'm pretty sure this is Barnes or Rough Stuff. Again, probably should have done more research before starting this, but one of those two, they make this bracket for the track bar. Instead of running the factory style one that goes down here, you can see, kind of sort of see here. So I cut that off and mounted this on because I wanted to get the track bar more level with the drag link here, try and reduce or eliminate bump steer as much as possible, because on my last set of axles that was kind of a big problem I had, was bump steer, just because the track bar was at such a heavy angle. And with that, I also ordered the Barnes / Rough Stuff frame side track bar mount. Kind of comes with a plate here, all this, a little brace. Again, welds not that great, but it works. And because nobody makes a track bar, obviously, for this kind of swap, also Rough Stuff, I ordered a 5/8 Heims with 1 3/4 wall DOM tubing and just kind of cut and made my own, and they've been working great. As far as steering, you can run the factory JT tie rod if it comes with your axles, if that's what you're going to do. However, I am actually going to run the TMR. I got this on sale with the double shear hydraulic clamp for the stabilizer. I got all of this for like $630. These Heims these ball joints, I should say, are actually meant to go into the factory knuckle, but they're much bigger, about the size of a pop can compared to these. So you don't have to do that. That's what I'm doing. Along with the TMR stuff, I am running their drag link, and this is actually for the JT drag link. Something I wish I would have done differently, because I did actually have to ream out the pitman arm. I forget what size it was, but I did have to ream it out. I think it's... Shoot, who is it? I think it's Rockjock or WFO Concepts, I believe, actually make a pitman arm that will go right up into the spline, and it actually accepts a JK end, and then you could run the JK drag link and still have the JT side ball joint. So with that, because I'm running the JT one, this is actually closed in all the way, and it works, but barely. My steering wheel is still cocked to the side just a hair, but it's honestly not going to bother me, and I'm not going to change it. But to get more adjustability out of it, I do recommend maybe going with a JK length drag link. As you can see, I'm also running the Redneck Ram Hydro Assist. Ended up just putting it through there, long bolt, double sheared it. I think I have like 8 inches of steering travel overall, so 4 on each side. So not too bad. That kit I think was $1,200, and then your old steering box, because I actually ordered a built steering box ahead of time. That way I didn't have or lose the drivability in my Jeep for a little while. So I just swapped that out, so you do get a $200 core return with that. And to help, I did this a while ago, is the Rough Country. They make a steering box like brace. So you just drill 2 holes on the passenger side of the frame, and then it's just a U-bolt that goes around the neck of the steering box. So that I think helped out a lot, especially when I was running my old axles. With the front end too, you can run the factory lower and upper control arm brackets as long as you have some sort of adjustable suspension. I am running the Rough Country long arm. As many have said, Rough Country does suck a little bit, but I've been very happy with this kit. The only downside is, 1, their joints are garbage, and 2, the radius arm tends to bind a lot. I was out in Colorado years ago, and I actually snapped both the upper control arm bolts from binding. I will probably change it to a 3-link later down the road. Not really sure yet, but I did go ahead and replace it with the Johnny Joint ends. There's another group I follow. Someone posted a link. You can find these ends on Trailforged. I think all in all, I spent probably about $500-600 on the joints, which it was only going to be a $50, maybe $70 difference between these and just replacing them with the Rough Country joints. So I definitely recommend this if you're running the Rough Country long arm. Now, as for the rear, unfortunately for the rear, nothing bolts up. I ended up having to buy an 88/60 swap kit from Rough Stuff and just welded the brackets on, angled the lower control arm brackets up a little bit to kind of help float over some of the rocks. Obviously, Jeep West knows more about this setup, so I know for a fact that I don't have the separation that's needed, but again, right now it works. I'm not going to mess with it. As far as measuring that up, these axles are 8 inches wider overall. So basically what I did is just, I think I went like 4 1/4 from wheel mount surface inwards to mount my spring perches, and then I went off the spring perches to mount everything else. So far that seems to work pretty good. As you can see though, this one side on the driver's side, spring's cocked in a little bit, but I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, so I'm just going to run it. Then obviously the track bar, still running the factory frame side track bar mount. Again, everything seems to be working pretty good. I did go with the Fox Resis on the back. They're meant for some sort of truck for like 5.5 inches of lift. They're a little softer than I'd want, but they do work. And for these, I found a Jeep on Marketplace that did something similar to this. I didn't really want to French anything in just because that was going to be a big project and my frame's already not the greatest. So this is Rough Stuff's flat frame mount. It's just a universal mount to go on pretty much any frame, whether it's for, you know, engine mounts, shocks, roll cage, whatever, it works. And then this is actually a lower shock mount for an axle side. I just cut off the radius and welded it to this to basically outboard my shocks. That way I could get a longer shock with more down travel than I'd be able to in the factory TJ location. I am also running the Artec coil perch relocation. I don't think that this is necessarily needed to do this swap, but obviously it makes it a little bit easier because, you know, everything's straight up and down. So that's that. Those rear shocks are about $600. Front shocks were about $400 to $500. Calipers were, again, about $500 to $600. Steering was, let's say, call it $12 once you account for fluid, if you have to get a new pump, whatever. Track bars, those, I think, between the Heims and the tubing, I probably spent about $400 there. Steering, again, I upgraded to some of the more expensive stuff. This is 7075 aluminum. So I think for the drag link and the tie rod together, it's between like $1,200 to $1,300. And yeah, the rear bracket kit for the axle is about, I think, $300 off Rough Stuff. Someone may have a kit out. They actually do the swap now. I'm not sure yet. But they definitely, Barnes definitely has it for the front, and that was a huge help. Now, as far as wiring in lockers, Quadratec sells the pigtails to actually plug in to the locker actuator there. Each one of those was about $80. So little pricey considering it's literally just a plug and some wires. I'm sure a lot of you that are better at wiring than I am could probably make that yourself. From what I've heard and read, you can, again, it's wired here the same. You leave the center wire out. That's basically a signal wire to actually show that, you know, a JT or a JL has the locker on. But all you need is the outside two wires. So each one of those was about $80, and I went a little further. Again, I'm not an expert on wiring. I kind of figured all this stuff out, so it's not pretty, but it does work. I found this little bus relay or fuse box off of Amazon for like $30. You know, got some speed wire here for, you know, $30. I found this switch panel on Etsy for TJ. It's 3D printed. This was about $100, but it comes with a, you know, your 12 volt outlet. Comes with another 12 volt for USB, another USB thing here. It does not come with these switches though, but I found these switches on Amazon from a company called GCD. They make the factory style TJ rocker switches. So obviously you can see we got, you know, front diff lock, rear diff lock. The FL, I'm assuming, is usually for front locker or fog light. I have this wired up to the FAD disconnect. So technically I do have the option to disconnect the shaft in the front axle, and doing that when in 4 low, if you leave it disconnected, I have function for 2 low without actually having an Atlas. So that was a huge benefit. I haven't had this on a road trip yet, so we'll see if having that disconnected actually makes a difference for fuel economy. But I'm kind of hoping it does. If not, whatever, it's a Jeep. So that's all routed up in there. And then underneath the hood, pop this up. I got this little box. It's a little relay box. I got this off Amazon also for probably 50, 60 bucks. It's super basic. It just comes with a bunch of leads and obviously the receiving ends for, you know, power in and power out. With that, all in all, for the wiring stuff, I think I would have rather go with an S-Pod. It's expensive. It's probably, I think, $600-700 if you get the one for the TJ. But it's already pre-wired. You can just hook all your accessories up to it and call it a day. It's probably about the easiest way to do it instead of running a freaking rat's nest of wires through your cab and your firewall and all that crap. And you can mount it anywhere. I mean, you could mount it up here, up there. I mean, some people have even made little block-off plates and just slapped it in here. That way it's a flush mount. If I would have done it, I would have liked to order the S-Pod to actually power everything, keep it clean, and then just run all their wires instead of going to their little push-button panel. I still would have liked to do the rockers. For me, I just like this kind of look here. But that's my 2 cents. And as far as that goes, I did find the FAD plug. I think I found it on eBay. I'd have to look a little further. But I think I found that on eBay for about 40-50 bucks. Again, you can just plug it right in. I'll try and find, I do have a screenshot somewhere of the wiring diagram, because it's technically just a magnet in there. It basically works like the locker, but you have a constant ground, which I just have running to this bolt here, constant ground, and then you have a constant power, and then the way it, you know, closes and opens is you actually alternate a ground. So it has constant ground, constant 12 volt, and then it has another switchable ground, which took me a while to kind of play with and figure this out, but I got it figured out. I'll try and find a diagram somewhere and maybe post that on the post I made earlier this week. And going back to brakes, I did go with an extended brake line for a JT from Synergy. Definitely didn't need it. That was probably about $100. That didn't really need it. I wasn't sure how much of a difference 8 inches was going to make as far as, you know, distance from frame to caliper, especially with, you know, flex and everything. But definitely not needed. You could probably go with a factory style, or something else I've learned is banjo bolts. At the time, I could not find the banjo bolts, and even when I ordered the calipers, they did not come with banjo bolts, which I thought was odd. So what I ended up doing is my old high pinion 30 and my 8/8 rear, I actually took the banjo bolts out of them, and they threaded into these calipers just fine. All I did was, you know, throw a nut on here, trim it down a little bit, back the nut off, blew it out, made sure there was no material in there, and I put the banjo bolt back in. You know, I obviously did the same for the rear. So that actually worked out pretty good, and there's no special fitting that's required up here. Even a JT line bolts straight up to a factory TJ brake line. And for the rear, I'll grab a creeper here. For the rear, I ran the lines similar to how the JTs run them. They go generally along the frame rail, but I ran my distribution block, just welded a nut up to the bottom of the tub, slid that block over, and made my own lines. You know, come down here. This is a Rough Stuff, let's see if we can get better light. A Rough Stuff clip here to just kind of accept a brake line. I just welded that to the frame, and then again, like the JTs and JLs, they run an individual soft line all the way down to the caliper on both sides. So far I haven't had any issues with that, you know, catching anything or limiting out. So that works pretty well. You can obviously, you know, brakes are brakes. You can run it on the axle. I just decided to do it up there. That way it kept it kind of, I don't know, simpler. And then it's a same size line on both sides. So those little clips there, I think those were like 15-20 bucks off Rough Stuff. It was, you know, super cheap. I actually found them on Amazon, but you know, same difference. For drive shafts, I'm running Adams drive shafts front and rear, and I decided to switch over to 1350 U-joints instead of the 1310s. So the rear drive shaft I think was about $400. Obviously they give you a new yoke to go in here instead of the CV style that was generally in this axle. Something I didn't know either is that if you are going to do this, do not put the dust shield back on the pinion. It actually makes contact with the seal here, and the seal will catch it, and then it rubs against this, and it just makes a god-awful sound. So do not put the dust shield back on here. I talked to Adams. They said that was fine. That's how they run it on everything else. So do not put the dust shield back on there. And for this whole gizmo here, this is a stock MP 231. So there's a company called Parts Mike. I believe they're out of Las Vegas. They make a driveline brake that bolts up. This little clamp ring here mounts up to the back of the transfer case as long as you have an SYE. And basically, you know, little thing up here, you're supposed to be able to connect it. I haven't found a way to, like, or honestly even a cable that would make this work with a clevis pin, but I will figure that out eventually. And part of the kit also includes a new flange to go inside the transfer case. This kit, at the time, I got this like 3 or 4 years ago, but I never wanted to install it when I had my old axles because I knew I was going to do this swap. So this kit at the time I think was like $450. Its instructions are somewhat limited. It is kind of a figure it out kind of deal, especially with, you know, running a cable. But eventually I'll get that figured out. That was a neat little thing. Obviously you don't have to do that, but it should be a sweet thing, especially because it's a 5-speed. I don't have a parking brake otherwise. As for the front, also running 1350 joints here. This is the stock JT flange, so that wasn't an issue. And then Adams also sent me a new yoke to go up into the transfer case to accept a 1350. And other than that, this required no extra modification, which was sweet. My uncle actually bought a set of JT Rubicon axles for his JT. He has a max toe, but it doesn't have lockers or anything. He gave me this little Fad skid here from Artec. I think this is normally like somewhere in the range of like $70 to $120, something like that. I definitely recommend having something. I believe the JTs do come with a factory skid, but it's kind of thin. This is a little bit thicker, and it kind of comes up the back a little bit more. The JT one just kind of has a slope here, which could bend. And again, this whole housing here is just plastic, so definitely want to protect that. So yeah, as far as I can think, that's about everything. The Jeep is on a 3.5-inch lift, Metal Cloak dual rate springs. Seems to ride just fine. The shocks were definitely a huge upgrade. I was running Bilsteins all around, and those were great shocks. They're a little stiff, but they worked. And I am running the Sway Lock sway bar. This is just a manual on-off, so before I hit a trail, I can just flip this back, and once the suspension flexes, this will slide back and release it, and then vice versa. Before I get off a trail and I know I'm getting on the road, just slide this forward. Once the Jeep kind of, levels out, does its thing, this will slide right back in. And that's the only sway bar I'm running, and this thing does great on the highway, on street roads. I live kind of out in the country a little bit, so there's a lot of curves. It does just fine. So I think that's everything. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to post a link or something on Facebook, tag me in it, or post in the comments down below. I hope this is helpful. So yeah, thanks.